So I am a traveling teacher at this juncture. I've been doing this, I guess, for the last decade,
Hmm.
and I will travel house to house. I've taught kids as young as 4, all the way through adults. So basically, whatever lesson they're looking for, I teach piano, I teach voice, and I do like audition prep, like theater
Mm.
work. Or
Uh,
if kids are in plays, we work on their, you know, on everything for their not only their auditions, but like when once they actually get their role, we work on all of that too. That way they can be
hmm.
their best for their performances. Um, and then I offer anything between 30 and an hour, really, I guess, for lesson lengths. I mean, yeah, that's
Yeah, awesome,
yeah.
awesome. Did you so like before you were teaching and traveling to the lessons, like what were you doing before again?
So I actually kind of like I've always taught like a lesson here or there.
Hmm.
Um, but I actually used to work in schools. At first, I
Oh,
was
okay.
working. I've had a few jobs in schools. I was a something called a step counselor, students towards educational progress. So I had like a group of kids who were in danger of failing the seventh grade,
Hmm.
and I would pull them out, or I would like push in and make sure that they were um, kind of like up to par and they knew what was going on, and anything they were struggling with, I would help them, almost like an in-house tutor of
Oh,
sorts,
really? Uh-huh.
to make sure that
Because they're working
they
like
passed.
one-on-one?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Then I was a TA for a long time.
Uh-huh.
I worked in kindergarten for like 4 or 5 years. And then I was a music teacher in a couple of schools in New York City,
Hmm.
and that was a whole separate ball game. But unfortunately, for music teachers, budget cuts come, and I was the first one to get laid off both times.
Oh, really?
So I figured that was not going to be the right scenario for me to try to work if I'm going to keep getting laid off because of that.
Yeah.
Um, and then I worked in special ed for a couple of years, and that was probably one of the hardest but most rewarding jobs I've ever had.
Hmm.
It was with severely autistic children, and it was one on one. And then I took a step back to kind of reevaluate what I wanted to do with my
Yeah.
life, because I felt like I was missing so much of that music for like a while. And,
Hmm.
just like singing and playing in my basement really wasn't like what I what wasn't what I had envisioned. So I started giving, a few lessons, and then it kind of just spiraled into
Oh.
where I am
What year
now.
was that?
So I took a step back from working in schools in 2012.
Hmm.
Um, and by 2013, this is what I was doing.
Oh, really? Nice. So
Yeah.
almost about over like 10 years about?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I graduated college in 2004. So
Hmm.
from 2004 to 2012, I was in schools in some capacity.
Yeah, awesome. And then like since 2013, how has like your piano voice studio kind of evolved since then? Like, is there like a progression there?
Oh, for sure. So of course, when starting out, I mean, you are not to say like a nobody, but like nobody know, you haven't been out there, so nobody knows who you are yet.
Hmm.
Um, so at first, I began working in other studios just to like dip my toe in the water, kind of
Hmm.
see how I liked it, and then what would happen is people would get your name from who knows where, some lovely little birdie who's like, "Hey, we we know this person and she teaches piano or she teaches
Yeah.
voice," and then through word of mouth you just start getting all of these private students, and that's just like, I mean, it just snowballed from there. I would say within a few years I was working like 75% private students, and then within like another year after that I was like, I don't need to work for anybody else now. I'm like, I can work
Uh-huh.
for myself, which was such a huge accomplishment. um,
Nice.
to feel like like I did it. Like, you
Hmm.
know what I mean? It was what I had wanted to accomplish.
Yeah.
So to be able to do that, and that's where I've been, for a long while now, and it has its ups and downs, but
Hmm.
I would much rather be doing this than something else.
Yeah, of course. It's always like when you're doing something you actually love, it's like the challenges are worth it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. They're still there, but it's
Yeah.
sometimes it doesn't feel as bad.
So I guess getting to where you are now, like what were some of those, like what do you remember as like the biggest challenges that you got over that you had to overcome as you were kind of in your journey of scaling up the studio?
I guess trying to find like that balance at one point, like when I was kind of like half working for myself and half working for others, and like
Mm,
finding that balance and, knowing, I guess, at first you're putting all of your efforts into working for somebody else, and then you're realizing that, okay, well, I have all of these people that are like my students, my
hmm.
private students, and you have to do a lot of housekeeping when you're working for yourself. So it's thinking about putting like X amount of effort into um, your studio, and then what effort are you putting into somebody else's studio.
Mm,
And it was an interest. I mean, not to say that I took anything away from the kids themselves, obviously not. But
hmm.
as far as like each semester, like what am I offering to somebody else versus what am I kind of opening myself up to get more students that are private. So I
Yeah.
think that journey of kind of coming from other studios into my own studio was probably
Hmm.
like one of the bigger challenges. And
Yeah.
it's like you don't want to. I'm I'm a people pleaser personally, so like I didn't want to feel like, oh, I'm letting them down, like they're losing a teacher because I'm. But it's like, you know what? They want to see you succeeding, and
Hmm.
you're teaching music, which is what they're promoting. So it's
Yeah.
not like you're like, I'm leaving this for some other random thing. Like they love seeing that you're doing well, and I'm still in touch with those people,
Hmm.
and they love to see that I'm thriving versus like not, which is a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice, and you can always work together too, um,
Hmm.
which is awesome. You don't have to limit yourself to like, no, if I'm on my own, I'm on my own, and I've had those thoughts for sure because I think once you, I mean, I don't know, I'm sure it's not just me, but like once you finally accomplish that, you're like, no, I don't need anybody else. Like I did it, it's me, I did it myself, I'm good, and but then at the same time, you're limiting yourself if if you ever want to do like any kind of workshop or anything to like bigger scale.
Yeah.
um it's great to work with other people. So
With a lot of teachers when they're making that transition, I think it's always just important to maintain that relationship, right?
yeah.
Whether they're a student or not, like
Hmm.
having that family, having that student, having the parent, having that personal relationship with them, um, is something that we can have whether we're working with them or not. And lots of times when I have teachers transitioning into like their hybrid model, it's first person that we usually talk to that we reach back out to are like past students and people that might want to work with you again. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that you like are like maintaining those relationships as you're growing as well.
Yeah, I mean, one of the hardest, I think, experiences I had with like moving on from people was we were living in New York and then we moved to Connecticut.
Hmm.
And I did 1 year of, I didn't have many students, but they were like farther into New York, and the travel just didn't make sense anymore.
Hmm.
Um, Thinking about all of the time I was in the car versus actually teaching. So I happened to have surgery this particular year, and I reached out to all those families. I think it was like four families, explaining that I'm no longer going to be serving their area.
Hmm.
And I had only gotten a response back from one family, like wishing me well and hoping that, that things continue to be good for me, and everybody else just kind of like cut
Mm,
ties. And I think that's hard sometimes when, I know for me, and I'm sure for any teacher, we have relationships with these families and with the kids that we're teaching. And I had taught all of those kids for years. So it was a very difficult decision for me personally. And it kind of feels like sometimes my husband and I talk about this sometimes where sometimes we feel very expendable. We're
mm,
just kind of, if they don't, they'll just find another teacher or,
mhm,
but at the same time, it's, it's hard to feel that way when you have such a relationship. So it's like finding that again with like a balance of like, having that relationship and nurturing that relationship. But on the other hand, just reminding yourself that if there are ties that are cut, it's okay. Like,
mhm.
it's not the end of the world. It's okay. And you kind of have to meet people where they are. And if they just want to not, like circle back with you and not, have any kind of relationship anymore, you have to respect it. And then if they do, then great. It is what it is. But I feel like that's hard, especially first. I don't know. I'm like I get attached.
Mhm.
So, it's like, and I just want to see these kids do well and have a good experience with music. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so that was like
Was there
another kind
anything
of
that
facet of that.
yeah, was there anything that you learned about yourself through that process? Like anything that maybe like an identity shift that you had to have to
Um,
get through that?
I mean, it was hard. And I think that, most of us, especially those of us who do start out as traveling teachers, we have to make those hard decisions.
Hmm.
Um, I've had some of those thoughts this year, and you kind of like, at least for me, I almost like argue with myself of like, this will be better for you. But no, you can't, I'm kind of like going back and forth and trying to figure out what's best because ultimately you have to think about what makes more sense. Again, when
Hmm.
you're traveling, there are so many variables. Whereas if you have a studio, whether it's an in-home studio or just like a local location studio and kids are coming to you, the possibilities I feel like are far more than you traveling. So I feel like that, to be honest, like the traveling part has probably been the the hardest part of all of this.
Hmm.
Um, and it's because I think something that people forget sometimes is that this is my livelihood. I've had a lot of people say, "Oh, so are you a teacher during the day? And this is
Mm.
just what you do as like extra?" Like, no, this is like this is it. So I think that so sometimes it might be hard for others to understand if you're like saying, "Hey, I'm not servicing that area anymore." It's like,
Hmm.
but why? Like it doesn't quite make sense. But for me,
Yeah,
I
this is
have
your
to,
livelihood.
yeah, like I have to, if I'm spending more time in the car than I am actually actively teaching, then it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, makes sense, makes sense. Um, I'd love to hear like, is there any big like what are the kind of like the biggest lessons that you've learned throughout your journey over the past 10 years? Like anything that you can share with others as well?
Um, Patience is definitely a huge one. When you're trying to scale your business, it's not going to happen overnight. And I think that, I don't know, I probably had that feeling of like, okay, once I get one student, it's just gonna, really fast, like happen.
Hmm.
And it will happen, but you might just have one student to start with, and that's okay. It kind of gets you used to what that's like. And I would say, just as an educator, and this was something that I was telling a friend the other day who's trying to get back into it as well,
Hmm.
as somebody who has a master's degree in education, something that was very much drilled into us, and I find is just so important, is that each student is going to learn differently. We don't all learn in the same way. So, if you might have certain beliefs on how students should be learning or like a method that you prefer over anything else, but that's not going to work for everybody.
Hmm.
Um, the kids are all different ages, and they're going to be all different, levels, beginners, and up. And they're going to learn, like, I know for myself, I'm more of a visual and tactile learner. So I need to
Hmm.
watch and then I need to do. And then for other students, they're more auditory learners. Maybe they need to hear the song first, and that's going to help them to kind of like associate what they heard to, okay, now I'm going to play this and it's going to make more sense in my head.
Yeah.
And I like to use different methods too. I mean, I use my iPad during lessons to encourage the kids. I do all kinds of, use a lot of colors,
Hmm.
like, especially with the little ones. Like, we're going to label left and right different colors, and we're going to review our alphabet, and we're going to like learn a song. And there's storybooks that I use that are really cute to learn the letters of the musical alphabet. And there's just so much that can be done to make sure that the kids are learning to their best ability. And I think a lot of teachers miss that mark because they are so stuck in, well, I believe this. I
Hmm.
believe the kids should be learning this way. This is how I learned. This is the best way. This is how, they're going to make progress. But in reality, we have to kind of let those kids steer us in the direction of how they're going to learn best. And I think,
Yeah.
like I said, I feel like a lot of teachers miss the mark. I belong to a lot of piano groups on Facebook, and there's always talk about things like that. And like, how do you deal with this kind of student? How do you deal with that kind of student? And a lot of teachers just say, oh, well, they're just rude. And it's like, oh, they're probably not. It's, there's probably something more going on here.
Hmm.
And they'll just like dismiss it as like, oh no, they're just spoiled. It's like, I I don't think so. Like, 4 and 5 year olds are tough. You have to like really get, on their level and like understand them more personally, and things will turn around. Um, but I think that's
That's
such a huge, huge thing.
Yeah, I think I know that is so important. I'm getting flashbacks of like in undergrad, my practicum classes and stuff. I had I had to take practicum my last year during COVID, like right when we had
Oh
COVID
no.
happening. So everything was online, and I also did a fellowship. So I was shadowing a teacher
Yeah,
at elementary school, um, like elementary school bands. So that was all on Zoom, and I did a fellowship like the whole year and
that's
taught.
wild.
So I definitely learned a lot about like adapting to people's learning styles and stuff like
Yes.
that. But
Yep.
like I know how important it is. I'm glad you mentioned that as well, not just like pedagogically.
Right.
The thing I share a lot with my clients as well is like even for our businesses and for our studios, like being able when we are able to offer like different environments where students can learn, whether it's in a one-on-one setting or whether it's a group setting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a lot of teachers out there. This is something that I kind of grew up with, like this mindset that I grew up with that I always felt like I went against. But there's a lot of teachers that feel like group lessons are better or one-on-one lessons are better, and I don't believe
Right.
any of them are better than the other. I believe
No.
there's better fits for the student that you're working with. So
Yes.
a lot of teachers, they try to move every student towards a one-on-one, or they feel like the one-on-one lesson is going to be the best for every student. However, like um, when I was teaching students, I would always put them wherever they fit best. Like if they
Right.
truly learn better in a one-on-one setting, then I put them in a one-on-one lesson with me. If they truly learn better in a group setting, then I would move them into my group class as well. So
Yeah.
finding like the different environments in which the students thrive in, um, I think is also an important job as us as teachers as
Yeah.
well.
See, and that's something like I would love to be able to do at some point. I don't have
Mm-hmm.
a space that I could offer group
Mm-hmm.
lessons, but I think, I mean, it's smart business wise. And it's also great, like you said, to give the kids an option, because there are kids that thrive in a group environment because then they
Yeah.
feed off of each other. And then there are kids who, I mean, I would definitely would have been one of those kids, and I probably still am as an adult, needing one on one, where like
Hmm.
if I was in a group, I'd probably be like la la la, like just not like kind of in my own world, and so but it's so nice to offer that, and that, like I said, it's something that is definitely one of my
Yeah.
wants, the thing, like something to add, if I'm able to at some point. I think that's like something else that's difficult when you're scaling your business too, is like figuring out like, okay, well, here's my goal. How do I get there? Like, if you
Mm.
want a studio, whether you like rent like an office space, or if you have an in-home studio, or you have a brick and mortar, or whatever it is, like if that's what your goal is, like how to get there.
Yeah.
um or like, my husband and I talk about um combining forces, and
Oh,
becoming like our own music school together, and like,
is that
but
in the works?
it's
Or is
it's
it
in
just like talks
talks.
right now? Just idea.
it's
Okay,
it's
okay,
just
okay.
talks. Yeah, because it would be a lot. It would be a lot.
Hmm.
So it's like, maybe now is not the time, maybe later when we're a little bit older, like, just trying, because I mean, he's crazy busy.
Hmm.
Um and it's like, at there are points where we've both had to turn people away. We're like, this is silly. Like, we shouldn't be turning
It
people
shouldn't
away.
have to
There's
be.
got to be
Yeah.
another way. So, it's like there are ways out there. And I think it's just, you meeting yourself where you're at and being like, okay, well, what's realistic for now? And how can we make a plan? If
Uh
now
huh.
is not the time, how can we make a plan for later to reach our goals? Like, I mean, to be honest, I would love to have an in-home studio. That's my
Ah,
dream.
nice. Yeah,
We,
I was kind of
yeah.
curious. Like, what's kind of like the vision that you have for yourself now? Because I know you're traveling a lot, but
Hmm.
like looking forward to how your studios will support your life. Like, what does that vision look like for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, right now I know that traveling is what I need to continue doing, which is fine. Um, we're both in our very, very early 40s, so we feel like, there's still time. We're still young. So, but ultimately, my piano teacher growing up, I would go to her house, and she
Hmm.
had this adorable little studio in the front of the house. And I've always dreamed of that, like just having an in-home studio, because I think about like the longevity of, doing this for a living. And I
Hmm.
just know for me personally, I like, it just tires me out, all the like all the traveling. My husband does much more traveling than I do, but it doesn't, not to say he doesn't get tired, but it doesn't bother him as much.
Hmm.
Um, And I just know for me, going, as we get older, it's more realistic for me to keep doing this if I had that ability to have kids coming to me.
Hmm.
Um,
So that's
it's,
kind of like your immediate, like short term
yeah,
next move, like just trying to switch that out.
but I can't right now. So we're in a rental where there's space to do it, but um, you like there's an HOA, and per the HOA,
Yeah.
you can't run a business through your home. So now is not the time, but I guess the hope is, if things change at all with the market at any point, be nice, and maybe we could actually like have our own home where we could make
Hmm.
sure that we had a space for that. Because I'm sure my husband wouldn't mind either doing that. Again, I don't.
Yeah.
He's not as bothered by the traveling, but and he actually still has a decent amount of kids who are virtual, which
Hmm.
I've tried to like expand and do more virtual. Nobody, I can't get anybody to do virtual.
Mm. Is that something you
So
possibly want to do?
I would absolutely like to add
Oh.
more kids. I
Uh huh.
totally would.
Hmm.
I mean, it has its ups and downs, and it has its pros and cons, and
Yeah.
but I think with certain kids and in certain scenarios, it works great, and I am never opposed to it. But my students are all mostly local, so
Hmm.
it doesn't make any sense with those kids. But I've tried to offer services on like websites that offer virtual lessons, and it's like crickets. So
Yeah.
it's really interesting that it's gone
Yeah.
from like necessary and like everyone's doing it to, oh my gosh, this is wonderful. At least we can do this virtually, to, oh my God, I don't want to look at an iPad ever again. So it's
Mm.
like, very. drastic change in that regards.
Yeah. Can I share something
Hmm.
that's worked for my teachers?
Yeah.
I think you could like definitely take away anyone else that's watching this as well. What I found is that um, at least for me, when I have market when I was posting content with for my piano studio, I never went about it of like, do you want online lessons or in person lessons? I always felt like if I were to talk about that, like the differences of online and virtual, I would like, at least for me, like I don't want people coming in that are making a decision on me based on whether I'm in person or virtual. So
Yeah.
what I've always created my content around is really around like the goal and the big aspiration these parents want for their kids. So uh, maybe like well-rounded kids, they want a safe and stable household, like talking about the goals and the benefits that music gets for the child. Like I've always gone about it like
Yeah.
that's kind of like the north star of my content. And if a parent really wants that goal and they associate music with getting to that goal, then being in person or being virtual is kind of like a small part of that. So
Right. Right.
I've always held the belief too that if people want to work with me, they will find a way to be able to do that. So
Yeah.
like the beauty of creating a personal brand is that when you have a really strong personal brand, people don't want to work with you because you offer one-on-one or because you offer group or online or in person, but it's because you're you. And people want to
Right.
work with Valerie because
Yes.
of
Right.
Valerie.
Hmm. And I have found that for sure. I mean, there's
Uh-huh.
like what was it, last summer even, I had
Yeah.
somebody who sought me out and they wanted me to help their child prepare for like a huge audition.
Really.
We've never met before, but they traveled to me. We weren't living in this place at the time. We were living in another apartment. Um, and they traveled to me to make sure that I was the one to give them the lessons.
Yeah, because they really wanted
Um,
to work with you.
yeah. And
I
like
love that.
that was great. It made me feel like, wow, okay, they really like me. So like, that was like such a great thing. And now I actually live closer to them. So now if they want to do that again this year, I could go to them and almost like
Yeah.
return not the favor, but you know what I mean? It kind of like is a nice like coming full circle of being
Hmm.
able to go to them and continue. Yeah, but it is, and I've worked really hard to have good relationships. And, I mean, there are people like, just as an example, I had a family who started lessons right before COVID and they continued the year, but then they took a break because they didn't want to do virtual because it was hard for her.
Hmm.
She was little. And when they started piano up like a couple years after that, it was with another teacher. But they loved me so much that they recommend me to anyone. They don't recommend their current teacher. They recommend me to all of their friends. And now I teach like a whole bunch of their friends
Hmm.
because they've recommended me, which is like, wow, okay. So you're not even going to recommend the current teacher because I've heard that their current teacher is very strict.
Hmm.
Um, and their daughter is not her biggest fan, but it's just it's just the path that they wanted to take for her, which is fine.
Yeah.
That's
But
not
like
me.
that's the power in the relationships right there that you build.
Right. Exactly. And when I see them, it's so, I mean, the kids remember me. They're so nice. The parents are always so nice. There's a good relationship there. And it's like, that means more than like them having kept me as a teacher because
Yeah.
it's like, like I said, they're going out and recommending me to, to all their friends because they thought that they think about, there's always like wondering if you're like the right fit for a student. And sometimes you're not going to be, and that's okay.
Hmm.
But I think that's a huge part of it too, is knowing like with word of mouth, if you're somebody and oh, your friends' kids are looking for lessons. This is the type of kid they are. This is the type of family they are. Yes, Valerie would be a really good fit. I'm going
Hmm.
to recommend her. Um,
Yeah.
and I feel like, and it says a lot about you as a teacher and just as a person, really. Um, it's, I guess, something that I pride myself on is like the relationships that I do keep with these families.
Hmm.
Um, I love people. I've always been a people person. I've always been really outgoing. Um, and I think that, and like I said, I'm also kind of a people pleaser, which can be a pro and a con. But I think that people appreciate it when it comes to um, like flexibility. Like I just had someone cancel last minute. The kids are in the recital, so of course I know it's last minute, and I have a policy. But at the same time, you know, life happens sometimes, and I would
Hmm.
rather the kids get their lesson before the recital than to be like, oh no, I'm just going to take the money and not,
Yeah.
because technically I can. Like it doesn't, you finding and people so appreciate that.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm
oh,
glad you have
remember
like
when
a.
she, yeah.
It sounds like you have like a real um, discernment when it comes to like your standards and boundaries
Hmm.
and maintaining that. Like an important value that that I share with a lot of my teachers is being able to, like, when we have a business that supports our lifestyle, it's really important that we maintain our boundaries and standards, um, whether it comes to like the types of students that come that we allow in our community,
Hmm.
the policies that we enforce, whether it's like maybe the expectations that we have for the students to be successful. For you, like, how has your boundaries and standards for yourself kind of evolved as you're growing your studio, and like how's that helped you be able to just run a studio that you enjoy more often? Whether does that show up in
Um,
like the types of students that you allow in or anywhere else? Like, what does that look like for you?
yeah, I mean, in the beginning, I didn't have any kind of policy at all. I was just kind of like flying off the seat of my pants. And then I had like a very light policy for a while. And then maybe it was 4 years ago, I worked with actually a mutual friend, or not really a friend, a like a sister of a friend. Um, she met or re-met me and then met this other girl, and she thought that we would just like hit it off. So she introduced us, and this other girl happened to be like a business coach, and she helped people with their, and it was specifically for musicians.
Mm-hmm.
And so she was like, I could help you with your, like your policy and like all of these things. And she opened my eyes up to um, some different policies, making things a lot neater and tighter and cohesive. And then we also talked about like scheduling. Scheduling is always the bane of my existence. It is so difficult. I loathe it so much, but it's a necessary thing that we have to do. Um, but she helped me kind of like figure out an easier way to schedule, and then also as far as like monthly payments go, like monthly payments instead of weekly payments, and like um, we just did so much that helped me kind of organize things in a much better way. And people at first, people didn't like understand certain things, and I had to explain, because in reality, even though I was making people sign this they weren't really reading it, because I got so many questions all the time, every month. Oh, why is this? Why is that? I'm like, well, per the policy. So that's something that gets a little bit frustrating when you put all of that effort in and you see that people are just not actually reading it. Um, but I think that what happens is once you kind of like put your foot down and you're like, okay, this is it,
Mm-hmm.
um, people eventually will start to realize that, oh, okay, this is what's happening. But you're always going to have people who disregard it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I have a family who I mean, it's been almost an entire school year. They never pay me on time, ever. And I know that I say that I have a late fee, and I've literally never put a late fee upon anybody because I'm trying, like, you want to be flexible. You don't want to scare somebody away by like not being flexible. So I just try to keep those lines of communication open and again, just try to be flexible. I get my payment. It's not like she doesn't pay me at all, but it just payments are due at the beginning of the month, not the end of the month. And that's when
Hmm.
she generally decides to finally like respond to my Venmo request. But I feel like that's something you're gonna deal with when you're running a business. There's going
Hmm.
to be those people that are just like not on top of those things. Um, but the kids really enjoy the lessons. So it's like
Hmm.
if that were a family that the kids just didn't care, they were super flaky and whatnot, I would probably have parted ways with them.
Yeah.
And that's the thing too, is I'm very honest about when I go in for a trial lesson. If I don't feel like the kids are ready, if I don't think like if the kids are clearly not into it, I'm going to be honest because I would rather teach kids that want to be there and want to learn than to get the extra money every week for a kid
Hmm.
who doesn't want it.
Yeah.
Because then it's a waste of time for me and then it's a waste of money for them. And it just like that just doesn't make sense to me at all. So I'm always and I walk in there and I tell them that I'll be very honest about whether I think it's going to work or not. And it's something that I guess it makes me sad that there are still parents out there that force their kids into lessons because they think it'll make them, like more well-rounded or whatever it is. And it's like, yes, it will. But if the kids are like super against it and they're like, I don't want to take piano lessons, then it just does like maybe they
Yeah. It
want to
doesn't
learn
serve
guitar.
anyone on
Maybe
either side.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I like that. I'm glad that you make sure that the kids like want to be there as well, and making sure that relationship is good between you and the student, also you and the parent.
Hmm.
I'm glad that that's your main focus.
Yeah, I mean, it's ultimately it's all about the student.
Hmm.
So if they're not, I mean, there are going to be days where like, oh, I just don't feel like it today. Nobody feels like it all the time. It's fine.
Yeah.
Like that's normal. But to every week, say, I don't want to do this. I don't like it. This is boring, whatever it is. Clearly, there's more happening there. And it's, like I said, I'm just the type of person who I would much rather have a wait for a student that actually wants to participate than to take the student who just doesn't like it at all and doesn't want to be there just to make the extra money. Like it
Yeah.
just,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. The moment we start doing that, like, that's just going to be a recipe for burnout right there.
Yeah. And I've already experienced that. And it's something that I feel like we need to be really aware of and like
Hmm.
pace ourselves. Like if we feel that like happening, to kind of like back up a little bit and be like,
Yeah. What
okay,
do
how
you
can I
personally
scale back?
do? Like when you are starting to kind of feel that stress, feel that burnout come up, like what do
Yeah.
you like to do personally to like take a step back, like give yourself some time?
Um, well, I happen to have, I decided to, like this year, I decided to have a few less kids,
Hmm.
um, to give myself a little break. Um, you know, it just, we all get burnt out. So it's like, you take that step back and then you realize, man, okay, like I got this. It's like, and that's how I'm feeling like renewed, which is
Yeah.
exactly what I wanted. Instead of
Nice.
feeling more burnt out, you feel like, all right, yes, I got this. This is going to be great. I can do more next year. This is great. But I feel like if, if things allow for that, then it's a smart thing to do. But also that's where like possibly expanding on your business is smart because, say you're able to hire other teachers, then you're delegating to others and maybe you can scale back on what you are personally doing as far as teaching goes. I feel like there's a lot of different ways to kind of recover from that feeling of being like, oh my God, like it's too much. But again, it requires a plan. It requires,
Hmm.
it's not something you could just kind of like do. You
Yeah,
have to
kind of
really like
curious.
plan it out. Yeah.
What do you do that like recharges you?
I do a lot of singing.
Oh,
That's
nice, nice.
that's like, and what's nice is they say like something as far as stress goes, like I'm very, I guess you'd call me like woo woo. Where like, I singing tones your vagus nerve
Hmm.
that runs like all the way down your body. Um, and working on your nervous system and like your vagus nerve like help to calm you down.
Yeah.
And singing is like a huge, like singing tones it. So it's something that at the minimum, like I'll just sing in my car, whatever it
Hmm.
is, or I'll sit and play and sing, and like it just it's always been something that kind of gives me that like yes.
You do like
Unless
breath work too?
yeah,
Yeah, me
I,
too, me
I've
too.
done I've done tapping,
Hmm.
meditation. What else do I like to do sometimes? Any kind of like little exercise like that that might like
Yeah.
give me that like even if it's just like a few minutes of like okay. And then I love to read just like
Hmm.
reading really I get to like be in a different place, and it just like gives me that like rest,
Yeah,
my
that
mind like a
space.
rest. Yeah.
I'm a walking person, so I'm
Yeah.
always taking like a walk around the
Yep.
neighborhood.
I love that too. And like just being in nature. I'm definitely
Hmm.
like my father's daughter when it comes to that because he is a huge nature person. Um, so just like my happy place is where we go in Vermont every summer, in the
Okay.
mountains, and I
Uh-huh.
just being out there and just like taking it all in and like listening to like the sounds and just like that it's just so peaceful. Um, and so anything like that, or like just like hobbies. I'm not as good about keeping up with a lot of hobbies. Like I love to craft and I do photography and like things like that. And like that's like remembering like who you are outside of music. Like yes, music obviously, but like
Hmm.
all of your other facets is like really helpful when you're trying to like ground yourself again and be like, all right, like I need a minute, like, and just taking on those things that you really enjoy that like give you life is so
Hmm.
helpful. And I feel like I've like done that more this year too. And a lot of like I said, like the tapping and the vagus nerve stuff and a lot of things to kind of like soothe my nervous system as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, first off, like thank you so much for
Sure.
sharing everything,
Thank
sharing your
you.
story, sharing your experiences, your lessons learned. Um, like I said before, kind of like when we were chatting earlier, like I know that a lot of teachers will get a lot of value out of this, but me in this moment right now, like I've learned so much. So thank you
Oh,
so
that's
much.
awesome. Yeah.
uh, for anyone that wanting to like reach out to you or learn more about what
Hmm.
you do, like I guess where's the best place to reach out to you? Is it like a website, like
I do
socials?
have a
Like what's the best
website.
place? Nice.
Yeah, I would say probably my website because there are links to other places too,
Cool.
like Instagram and Facebook and my email. Um, so the website is www.valtmanmusic.org.
Cool.
So
Awesome. I
just
can
like,
include it in the
yeah.
video for sure.
Okay, awesome. Yeah.
Sweet. Other than that, though, like, thank you so much for sharing, and it was a pleasure
Yeah,
bringing you
thanks for
on.
having me.